As we all know, Hitler was capable of anything to implement his ideas and solidify his Nazi regime. He employed every means at his disposal, military, diplomatic, even science and medicine, as weapons of extermination. Given that Hitler was a mad dictator, it was hardly surprising that his associates, including his leaders and hospital doctors, were equally unhinged. Today we recount the story of one German doctor whom Hitler admired and granted a significant position. While the medical world boasts many inspiring tales of those who dedicated their lives to serving humanity, this doctor chose the opposite path by supporting Hitler and his regime, earning the distinction of being one of the worst physicians in human history. This is the story of Karl Clauberg. Karl Clauberg was born on September 28, 1898, in a small town called Fabrichtshof, which was part of the German Empire. At the age of 15, World War I broke out on July 28, 1914. In early 1916, Clauberg joined the German army and served as a combat soldier. However, in 1917, he was captured by British forces and became a prisoner of war. After the armistice was signed in France and the war ended on November 11, 1918, many prisoners were released, including Clauberg, who then returned to Germany to pursue medical studies. In 1920, he enrolled at the University of Kiel to study medicine, later continuing his education at the universities of Hamburg and Greifswald. He graduated in 1924 and began his career as an assistant at the Institute of Forensic and Social Medicine at the University of Cal. After working there for a year, he earned his doctorate in medicine and went on to serve as an assistant at a hospital specializing in obstetrics and gynecology, focusing on research related to sex hormones. On January 30, 1933, Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany after being appointed by President Paul von Hindenburg. Shortly thereafter, on May 1, 1933, Clauberg joined both the Nazi Party and the German Army. Initially, his support for Nazism was relatively subdued, as the party had not yet fully seized power. However, he soon became a staunch advocate of the false theory of biological racism, believing that Germans were biologically distinct and superior to all other races. In 1935, the Nuremberg Laws were issued, imposing severe restrictions on marriages between Germans and Jews, blacks, or Romani people. This development was particularly admired by Clauberg, who had already earned the favor of both Hitler and high-ranking German officials due to his reputation in hormonal research. His work lent support to Hitler's vision of a new racial order, and his ability to develop methods to control fertility and research infertility further bolstered his standing. By 1937, Clauberg was appointed as a professor at the University of Kongressberg to continue his research on female fertility hormones, especially progesterone. This position allowed him to refine his studies and apply his research toward treating infertility, as well as to secure the credentials necessary for practicing medicine. However, with the outbreak of World War II in September 1939, following Nazi Germany's invasion of Poland, Clauberg returned to military service, this time serving as a physician. During the war, Clauberg grew closer to Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS security forces, after arranging a meeting through Dr. Kober, who treated the wife of a high-ranking SS officer. Seizing the opportunity, Clauberg requested permission from Himmler to carry out mass sterilization procedures on women for his experiments. In the atmosphere of extreme fanaticism that permeated Hitler's inner circle, he was granted the chance to execute his gruesome experiments. Here, medical personnel, including Dr. Kober, examined and diagnosed inmates to determine who was fit for forced labor and who was not. Those deemed unfit were executed in the most brutal ways. Auschwitz became not only a detention center, but also a site for a range of inhumane experiments. With the camp's prisoner population reaching approximately 1.3 million, comprising men, women, and children of various ethnicities, researchers found an abundance of subjects for their experiments. Clauberg was one of 12 medical staff members from the SS assigned to Auschwitz. Among his colleagues, Dr. Joseph Mengele stood out as the most notorious Nazi doctor. These physicians saw their assignments at Auschwitz as an opportunity to advance their scientific research through experiments that resulted in the death or severe mutilation of the prisoners. In many cases, the inmates were left uninformed about the details of the experiments or the potential risk of death or disease. They were subjected to operations without understanding their fate, enduring dismemberment, wounds, and the injection of diseases, all under the guise of scientific research. While the Nazi military sought the systematic extermination of the Jews, Clauberg's experiments in mass sterilization were aimed at achieving a similar end. At that time, Germany was in dire need of forced labor from prisoners and Jews due to a labor shortage. The regime planned to keep many of these individuals alive in the camps, provided they were rendered incapable of reproduction. Accordingly, Clauberg was tasked with carrying out mass sterilizations as a means to accomplish this goal. In 1943, the Nazis established Camp No. 10 at Auschwitz, equipping it with all the necessary tools for Clauberg to commence his experiments. He would take women into special rooms, have them lie on X-ray tables, and then inject them with a thick liquid substance into their uteruses using an electric syringe. The treatment was so harsh that the women often suffered from severe infections and other debilitating side effects. Entry into these experimental rooms was strictly forbidden, even for SS personnel, and the anguished screams of the patients were so unbearable that female SS officers would leave their posts to check on what was happening. After the experiments, the women were photographed and then returned to the camps to endure pain until death. In some cases, the experiments were repeated on the same women for 3 to 4 weeks. In May 1944, Dr. Kober sought to test a new sterilization method and sent a message to Berlin requesting Hitler's permission to gather 400 male prisoners along with 250 women who had been subjected to experiments, or others, and to include an additional group of women for an artificial insemination trial. Dr. Kober's experiments attracted significant attention from the SS, particularly from Heinrich Himmler, due to their relevance to the Nazi plan for Jewish extermination. Himmler was keen to determine how long it would take to sterilize 1,000 Jewish women, and Clauberg responded that if each doctor, assisted by 10 aides, worked together, they could sterilize hundreds of prisoners. Reportedly, more than 1,000 women were sterilized by his methods. One nurse who later worked with Clauberg recalled that if a female inmate died during the procedure, Dr. Kober showed no concern as he considered it irrelevant. On January 27, 1945, Auschwitz was liberated by the Soviet Red Army. However, Clauberg managed to escape from the Ravensbrück camp, which was under Nazi control. While at Ravensbrück, he planned to transfer his female experimental subjects from Auschwitz to his new location. Despite the chaos, he was determined to continue his sterilization experiments on at least 30 women. Yet, after 3 months and with the advancing Allied forces, Clauberg was forced to flee once more and join the last contingent of loyal SS members, becoming the only doctor known to have escaped from Auschwitz. Subsequently, Heinrich Himmler was captured. He committed suicide en route to American prisons. On June 8, 1945, Clauberg was apprehended by the Russian army, approximately a month after World War II ended. He was imprisoned in the Soviet Union for 3 years before being tried and convicted of war crimes, receiving a sentence of 25 years in prison. In 1953, following the death of Soviet leader Stalin, a prisoner exchange was carried out under the terms set by Polyanin, and Clauberg returned to West Germany in October 1955, along with a group of other German prisoners. Strangely, Clauberg soon resumed work in his former clinic, funded by money he had received from the Nazi government for his research and the sterilization of Jewish women enjoying a luxurious lifestyle. In 1955, an uprising by survivors of the concentration camps erupted, demanding that Clauberg be rearrested and tried for his crimes. The German medical community, however, resisted any measures that might strip him of his title as a doctor. A group of physicians who had once been prisoners at Auschwitz even issued a statement condemning his actions as a violation of the medical oath they had sworn. In November 1955, an arrest warrant was issued for Clauberg, but he was subsequently admitted to a psychiatric hospital after his wife accused him of threatening her with large sums of money. In early February 1956, doctors confirmed his mental instability, labeling him as an abnormal personality, and he was then incarcerated. By March 1957, his license to practice medicine was revoked. In his final days, Clauberg suffered from extreme obesity and died suddenly in his cell at the age of 58. It is said that he had intended to expose the names of other Nazi doctors involved in unethical hormonal research, a revelation that ultimately cost him his life. While some may regard him merely as a mad, narcissistic doctor driven by his own ambitions, the undeniable truth remains. Clauberg, like Himmler and their leader Adolf Hitler, was a deeply disturbed individual who ultimately received the punishment his crimes warranted. Thus, we come to the end of our story, a story that reminds us of just how far humanity can fall when science and ethics are perverted into tools of genocide and oppression. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to support us in creating more great content. Your support keeps us going.